Welcome to the deep dive. Today we are cracking open a sprawling, meticulously maintained database belonging to a self-proclaimed old software plumber.
Right, a guy named Aang.
Exactly. And we are looking specifically at an entry of his titled Notes on Fishkeeping, Part 218.
Which is such a great title.
It really is. But your mission today, as you listen, isn't really about fish at all. We are exploring a brilliantly unexpected intersection of biological espionage and systematic problem solving.
Oh, absolutely. It's a fascinating case study.
Right. We are going to figure out how to debug a system when the system itself is actively intentionally lying to you. Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah, and I think the sheer scale of this source material is the perfect place to start because it tells you everything you need to know about the mind of our protagonist here.
For sure. I mean, Aang's site, kianmanga.orba, it's this massive archive.
It really is. It's thousands of daily posts stretching all the way back to 2011. And he documents every facet of his life with the exact same methodical, analytical rigor.
Yeah, you can scroll through 15 years of archives and watch him jump from, notes on Haskell programming directly to notes on gardening.
Right, and then he just pivots to photography or dieting or meditation.
He is the ultimate tinkerer. He approaches biological systems like his garden or his aquarium with the exact same mindset he uses to write open source code.
He expects logic. He expects rules.
Which brings us to the inciting incident in Part 218. So, Aang is dealing with a critical bug in his biological hardware.
A severe aggression problem in his fish tank.
Exactly. He keeps Golden Mbuna, which are scientifically known as Melanochromis auratus.
And anyone who's familiar with African cichlids, particularly those from Lake Malawi, like the Golden Mbuna, well, they know they are notoriously fiercely territorial.
They don't just swim around looking pretty, right?
Not at all. They stake a claim to a specific rock formation, and they defend it with just stunning violence.
Wow. And in Aang's case, the problem is localized to one very specific, very aggressive user in his system.
Yeah, a dominant male.
According to his notes, this dominant alpha male is relentlessly chasing and terrorizing the other fish in the tank.
A population that Aang, at this point anyway, assumes is entirely female.
Right, so the balance of the entire ecosystem is just crashing.
Yeah.
So what is the software plumber's intervention here? How does he patch the aggression bug?
Well, he introduces more fish.
He just dumps more Golden Mbuna into the tank.
Yeah. And the underlying logic he is trying to apply here is a known, albeit pretty intense strategy in the cichlid hobby. It's called overstocking.
Overstocking, okay.
The theory is based on dispersal. If you have one alpha male and only 2 or 3 targets, those targets will be harassed to death.
That makes sense.
But if you introduce 20 targets, the dominant male can't really focus his aggression. The harassment gets diluted across a larger population.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, nobody takes the full brunt of the attacks, and the tank supposedly reaches this sort of chaotic equilibrium.
See, I have to push back on this logic. As someone who approaches problem solving from completely outside the aquarium hobby, this sounds entirely counterintuitive.
It really does.
It feels like a frustrated programmer trying to fix a buggy, bloated piece of software by just indiscriminately pasting in hundreds of extra lines of code just to see what happens.
That is a perfect analogy.
Or, to put it in real-world terms, if you have a room with a highly aggressive, screaming toddler in it, tossing 5 more toddlers into that room doesn't usually calm things down.
No, it definitely did not.
Adding more variables to an already volatile environment just feels like, an invitation for new, weirder bugs to emerge.
And the fallout from that decision proves your skepticism is entirely warranted. The overstocking strategy did not result in a calm, peaceful tank.
Not at all.
Instead, adding more fish triggered a completely unexpected, highly visible symptom. One of the larger fish in the tank began to undergo a drastic physical transformation.
Wait, really?
Yeah, it initiated this massive color shift.
And we aren't talking about a beautiful, majestic transformation here.
No, not at all.
Usually, when we picture tropical fish changing color, we imagine them glowing, right? Becoming these vibrant neon displays of dominance or health.
Right, but this fish went in the exact opposite direction. It didn't turn a brilliant yellow, or a deep, aggressive blue, or a stark black.
According to Aang, it faded.
Yeah, it actively washed itself out, turning into these muted, muddy, earthy tones of yellow and brown.
If you are an amateur hobbyist, your immediate diagnostic thought is going to be, oh, great, my tank is so stressed out that now the fish are getting sick.
Exactly. They're losing their color. They're dying.
But the bug here isn't a disease. It's not a failure of the system at all.
No, it's a feature. What's fascinating here is the underlying biological mechanism at play. Ang dives into the research and discovers a blind spot in his own data collection.
A pretty big blind spot.
Definitely. Using basic body color to identify the gender of a Golden Mbuna is simply not a bulletproof metric.
So that fish that turned dull, the one washing out its colors, wasn't a sick female succumbing to stress.
Nope. It was a male.
Here's where it gets really interesting. This fish is engaging in active biological camouflage.
Yes. It was a subdominant male.
And it is intentionally changing its outward appearance, literally suppressing its own natural colors to blend in with the females.
It is running a disguise protocol just to avoid the wrath of the dominant alpha.
That is wild.
It's a stunning evolutionary survival tactic. The dominant male is programmed to attack anything he perceives as a threat to his territory or his mating rights.
Which primarily means other males.
Exactly. So the subdominant male calculates that the energy cost, and frankly the physical danger, of displaying his true identity are simply too high.
He suppresses his own physical characteristics.
He downgrades his own visual output just to survive.
It completely flips the narrative of what is happening in that glass box. It reminds me of a notoriously toxic corporate environment.
Ooh, I like where you're going with this.
Imagine you've got an absolutely domineering, aggressive boss running a department meeting. He attacks anyone who stands out, anyone who pitches a bold idea, anyone who looks like a threat to his authority.
Yeah, we have all sat in that meeting, desperately trying not to make eye contact.
Exactly that feeling. So what does the smart, highly capable, but perhaps slightly less aggressive employee do?
They lay low.
Right. They don't wear the bright tie. They don't speak up with the innovative pitch. They deliberately put on a bland, boring gray suit. They sit quietly in the back row, and they just try to blend into the drywall.
They mute their own identity.
Yeah, their own talents, just to survive the environment without catching the alpha's eye. That is the exact biological script this fish is executing.
The analogy is spot on.
Yeah.
And from an evolutionary standpoint, the gray suit tactic is incredibly successful. The subdominant male survives to see another day without being ripped apart.
But while it works for the fish, it causes a massive systemic headache for the human managing the database.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Because the fish is actively deceiving the observer.
Ang is relying on a standard visual metric color to understand his system, but the system is spoofing that metric.
And this isn't just an academic problem for him. His ultimate goal isn't merely to keep these fish alive.
He wants to breed them.
Right. Successful breeding for this specific species requires a very strict social structure. You need to establish harems.
Okay, harems.
Yeah, the ideal ratio is one male to multiple females. If you throw multiple males in with a few females, the violence will escalate until only one male is left anyway.
But if you can't trust what your eyes are telling you about who is a male and who is a female, how do you possibly set up those harems?
You really can't.
If you're listening to this and you audit finances or manage a large team, you've probably faced this exact scenario. You rely on a dashboard metric, but the people being measured figure out how to game the metric.
Exactly. If Ang accidentally groups a subdominant male in his gray suit disguise with the dominant male, thinking he's just putting two females together,
that disguise might eventually fail.
or the dominant male might figure it out, then you're instantly back to violence and a crash system.
So the core question becomes, how do you find the truth when the surface data is lying to you?
When the easiest, most obvious metric turns out to be entirely compromised, you have to build a better identification matrix. You have to stop relying on a single point of failure.
And this is where Ang's software engineer brain really kicks into high gear. If the color is a lie, he has to look for clues the fish can't easily fake.
Right. He starts cross-referencing their overall architecture.
He moves from a simple visual check to a multivariable analysis. He outlines 4 main factors that must be evaluated together.
Coloration, fin shapes, body shape, and egg spots.
Breaking down that matrix reveals the complexity of the observation required. Let's look at the females first.
Okay, so while they might share the yellow base with a disguised male, true females typically display more vibrant, distinct black stripes across that yellow.
And their structural architecture is also different.
Yeah, they have a generally rounder body shape, and crucially, their fins are rounder at the edges.
Then you contrast that with the true males. When they aren't, suppressing their identity, their coloration shifts entirely to light blue stripes on a black body.
Their overall body shape is more streamlined, less round.
And their fins are distinctly different. Males typically have sharp, pointy fins
Yeah.
rather than the rounded edges found on the females.
Right. And then there's the fourth variable in Eng's matrix, which is perhaps the most fascinating piece of cichlid anatomy.
The egg spots.
The egg spots.
I was wondering when we would get to those. Explain what an egg spot actually is, because it sounds like another layer of biological deception.
It is. It's a brilliant evolutionary trick. Male cichlids typically develop these distinct, highly visible circular patterns on their anal fins.
That's the fin on the bottom of their body near the tail, right?
Exactly. These spots are colored and sized to look exactly like the eggs the female lays.
Why does the male want his fin to look like an egg?
It's a critical part of their reproductive cycle, which is called mouth brooding. The female lays her actual eggs on a rock and then immediately turns around and scoops them up into her mouth to protect them.
Wow.
Yeah. The male, wanting to fertilize those eggs, flares out his anal fin, displaying those fake egg spots.
So she thinks they are real eggs.
Exactly. The female, thinking she missed a few eggs on the rock, tries to scoop up the spots on his fin. When her mouth gets close, the male releases his milt, or sperm, fertilizing the real eggs safely inside her mouth.
That is wild.
It really is.
The male literally uses a visual interface trick to ensure his genetic code gets passed on.
Nature's UI design.
Right. So for Aang, the presence, number, and intensity of these egg spots become a crucial data point in the matrix.
Now, instead of just glancing at the tank and saying, oh, yellow means female, he has to evaluate a complex dashboard.
He has to look at the vibrancy of the stripes, check the roundness of the body, examine the tips of the fins to see if they're pointy, and count the egg spots.
He has to synthesize all 4 data points simultaneously.
Mastering any complex subject requires this exact evolution in thinking, really.
Oh, without a doubt. If you rely on a single metric, like just reading the headline of an article or looking only at top-line revenue in a financial report or checking a single error code, you will eventually be led astray.
True understanding, true debugging requires synthesizing multiple, sometimes conflicting data points to see the 3D model instead of just the 2D picture.
But here is the craziest part of Aang's journal entry. Even after building this robust 4-factor identification matrix, even after carefully studying the stripes, the body shape, the fin points, and the egg spots.
He still isn't satisfied that he has the absolute truth.
No, he isn't. Because the vulnerability in his new matrix is that visual cues are still ultimately subjective.
Human observation is flawed.
Exactly. A fin might look sort of pointy to Aang on a Tuesday, but maybe it's just a slightly less round female fin.
Or a body might look robust and round, but maybe it's just a male that ate a particularly large meal that morning.
Right. And when you have a subdominant male dedicating its entire biological energy to spoofing the system, holding its fins differently, dulling its colors, it can still hack the matrix.
So if the color and the fins are the software interface, Aang realizes he has to crack open the case and look at the motherboard.
That's a great way to put it.
If he wants a 100% guarantee, no assumptions, no guesswork, he has to bypass the visual software entirely.
He has to go straight to the hardware.
So what does this all mean? How do you perform a hardware check on a living, breathing, highly aggressive fish?
Well, it requires a highly meticulous, incredibly hands-on procedure known in the aquaculture hobby as venting.
Venting. It sounds intense and honestly a little invasive.
It is the definition of invasive, but it is the only way to get absolutely accurate gender identification when the visual software is unreliable.
Okay, so how does it work?
Venting involves physically netting the fish out of the water, gently turning it upside down in your wet hand, and closely examining the underside of the fish.
Specifically the area just in front of the anal fin.
Right.
You are looking at the literal biological plumbing of the animal. What anatomical hardware is Aang actually looking for down there?
He is looking for the vent and the reproductive pore. It comes down to comparing the microscopic size and shape of 2 specific holes.
Okay.
If you flip over a male Golden Mbuna, you will see 2 holes, the anus and the reproductive pore, and they will be almost identical in size.
2 holes equal size. That indicates a male.
Yes.
And what structural difference gives away the female?
If it is a female, you will still see 2 holes. But the reproductive pore, the oviduct, will be significantly larger than the anus.
And the biological why behind that is undeniable. The female's pore is larger because it physically has to pass spherical solid eggs.
Yeah, the male's pore only has to pass liquid milt.
The physical reality of the anatomy dictates the outcome. You cannot fake an oviduct.
You really can't. A subdominant male can change his color to muddy brown, He can clamp his fins to look rounder, he can hide in the rocks, but he cannot magically alter his internal reproductive plumbing.
You either have the hardware to pass an egg or you don't.
It is the absolute, binary, irrefutable data point.
The ultimate truth of the system. But the reality of actually executing this hardware check is mind-boggling. Ang writes in his post that because the visual deception is so strong, he is contemplating catching and venting every single fish in his population to get the identification perfectly right.
I mean, try to picture the logistics of that undertaking.
It sounds like a nightmare.
It really does. He has a tank full of incredibly fast, highly aggressive, stressed-out cichlids. He has to chase them down with a net, one by one.
He has to handle them gently enough not to harm their slime coat, hold them upside down while they are thrashing.
He might possibly have to use a magnifying glass to compare the diameter of two microscopic pores.
Wow. And then log the data and separate them into the correct holding tanks?
He casually admits in his journal, oh, it's a tedious process.
Which has to be the understatement of the year. Seriously. But if we connect this to the bigger picture, this tedious process perfectly encapsulates the soul of the software plumber we met at the beginning of the journey.
Oh, absolutely.
Confronted with biological chaos, confronted with a system that uses active deception and survival tactics to subvert his expectations, Ang doesn't just throw his hands up in defeat. He doesn't settle for good enough or rely on a matrix he knows has a margin of error.
He resorts to a highly systematic, intensely laborious, but totally foolproof audit of the entire environment.
He establishes order by digging down to the most fundamental layer of truth available to him, the bare metal of the biology.
Because to him, an unverified assumption is a bug waiting to crash the program.
It is a masterclass in cross-disciplinary thinking. He takes the rigorous, uncompromising logic of systems administration and data validation and applies it to the wet, messy, deceptive world of a glass box in his living room.
It transforms what could have been a frustrating weekend chore into a profound lesson on finding the truth.
So, to recap the journey we've been on today, we started with a software engineer looking at an aquarium, trying to fix a simple aggression bug.
Right. His initial counterintuitive fix of scaling up the population failed, but it forced a hidden feature of the system into the light.
We discovered the biological espionage of the subdominant male, a fish willing to wash out its own vibrant colors and put on a dull disguise just to survive a toxic, domineering environment.
And that deception forced our engineer to abandon simple visual metrics and develop a complex four-factor identification matrix.
Looking at color, body shape, fins, and the fascinating mimicry of egg spots.
Finally, realizing that even the most complex visual dashboard can be spoofed by a determined user, he resolved to perform a complete hardware audit.
He accepted the tedious, unglamorous work of venting every single fish, checking for the undeniable biology of the oviduct to guarantee absolute accuracy.
It is a powerful reminder that when you are tackling the complex problems in your own life, whether you are debugging thousands of lines of code, trying to understand a dense research paper, or just managing the personalities on your team, the surface-level answers, the easy dashboards, are very often lying to you.
The most valuable data is rarely sitting out in the open, waiting to be glanced at. You have to synthesize multiple points of view, and sometimes you have to be willing to do the exhausting work of checking the hardware yourself.
Absolutely.
Which brings us to our final thought for today's deep dive. We've talked extensively about systems, data validation, and finding the objective truth. But I want you to think back to that subdominant male fish.
One in the gray suit.
Yes. The one that made the calculated evolutionary decision to completely suppress its outward identity. It gave up its vibrant colors, its natural shape, its very nature, putting on a dull, invisible disguise just to survive in a highly aggressive space. It compromised its identity for safety. So here is a lingering question for you to ponder on your own after we wrap up here. If a fish is willing to completely wash out its own identity to avoid the wrath of a dominant force, what parts of our own identities, our own unique talents, or our own vibrant opinions do we unconsciously mute or disguise when we step into high-pressure, dominant spaces in our daily lives?